Okay. Okay. Uh, I think we've got all the technical issues hammered out. So today I'm gonna be talking about some general aspects of design in Pathfinder 2e, and just going over things. I'm not feeling the best today, so we're keeping it somewhat simple. So I have right here my unspoken rules and guidelines for game design in 2e, which these are mostly sort of best practices for if you're making homebrew or making third-party content, to just keep things as close as possible to basically recognizable system language, if that makes sense. And in reality, some of these might have something in here that's slightly out of date just because I did write this before the remaster, but most of it should still apply pretty well. So hard rules, quote unquote hard rules, are just things that are extremely consistent within the system and in sort of the visual language of how 2e is written. So we have ordering, which is, so if you have an inline action activity or activation where like there might be multiple facets, sometimes it's just, here's your action costs, here's your traits, here's what it does. And sometimes you've got frequency, triggers, requirements, and so there is a particular order to those things. You have frequency first, you have trigger second, requirements third, and effect last. And technically speaking, if there's a special section, it would go after this, but you won't usually see that. In an inline, you'll see specials on things like feats and things with their own header, basically. This one is capitals for a thing that I had to get fixed a lot when I was doing editing. So bolded pre-qualifiers that are always followed by a capital letter. Basically, the bolded pre-qualifiers are like, if you're reading an item block, it's like your price, your bulk, your usage, things like that. Or like your degrees of success and failure, the effects, requirements, and trigger. So these should always be followed by a capitalized word, whereas some of these entries do not. And this took me forever to actually find some of them because most of them are almost universally followed by a number. But degrees of success and failure are always capital. Effects should be capital. Requirements and triggers should always be capital. The rest of these do not have to be capitalized. Of course, if the first word would be capitalized, like a feat name, a skill, a proper noun, basically. A save type, things that are otherwise normally capitalized throughout the system. You don't capitalize it after these unless it's that exception. You got bulk, cost, duration, frequency, prerequisites, primary check, which is from rituals, range, saving throw, if using basic, see below text, secondary checks, targets, and traditions. I think the saving throw thing here was changed in the remaster, technically, to be defense. And the way defense is formatted, I believe it would just kind of always be capital anyway, because you're either looking at fortitude, will, reflex, or AC and possibly perception as an option, all of which would be capitalized anyway. So it shouldn't come up that you need to wonder, does this need to be capital? But in the rare case, at the very least, the old saving throw precedent is something to look at. Secondary check, again, from rituals, targets, and traditions for spells. Inconclusive, these were ones that I could not find an example of there not being a number after them. And so, area, casting time, well, I guess it's not a number, it's a number of actions, but, and secondary casters. Formatting, italics. Spells are lowercase unless a proper noun, such as Missile of Gladebrand, and in italics. So all spells should be lowercase and in italics. Of course, if it is starting a sentence, then it's capitalized. Like, you follow normal capitalization rules. It's just spell names are not generally treated as proper nouns in of themselves for the sake of capitalization. And you italicize them to help them stand out from the crowd and indicate that there is a mechanical component and it's not just words. Magical items, but specifically not mundane or alchemical items, are in italics, and are generally lowercase unless, again, there's a proper noun or it starts out of the sentence or something like that. So Hormister's burning cloak would capitalize Hormister, but like a burning cloak would just be lowercase like that. A +1 striking longsword is all lowercase, but +1 striking longsword of brain might have brain capitalized. Sorry, my cat's distracted me. Book titles. So on occasion, you might reference another book in what you're writing so that you can point somebody like, this item's from Guns and Gears, or this item's from Secrets of Magic or Monster Core, or I mean, you're not going to find too many items in Monster Core, but still, a way to point people to a book. Book titles should be appropriately capitalized to the title, and they are in italic, but not when in superscript. So occasionally you will see superscript instead of parenthetical book titles. So like SOM is Secrets of Magic, GMG is Game Mastery Guide. Of course, this was pre-master, so that would be GMC now. And those are usually superscript and bold, but not italic. These are guidelines or rules of thumb, soft rules, because there is no express, like, hard pattern. They're close, but again, it's soft. So if you're making items, or not necessarily items, as we will talk about, so vehicles and siege weapons are not items in the game, technically. They are their own categories. So with vehicles, if you're looking at building a vehicle and you decide on an item level, essentially, you can still go into the building item rules and get pretty much everything you need. But for vehicles, you triple the values on the price table for how much it costs. For siege weapons, you multiply them by 2. So if a level 8 item, or a level 6 item, I think it is, it costs 250 gold. A siege weapon is going to cost 500, and a vehicle is going to cost 750. And of course, there's still that range. So if it's very niche in use, it will probably be cheaper, on the cheaper end of that range, doubled or tripled as appropriate. Special materials, a thing that, so like cold iron, dawn silver, adamantine, all that have a tendency to follow this particular formula, which is hardness times 2 equals broken threshold times 2 equals hit point, i.e. hit points are 4 times the hardness. Exceptions for 0 hardness and 1 hardness materials exist with some level of commonality. Generally, materials with 0 hardness only have 1 hit point and no broken threshold. And 1 hardness materials sometimes do something similar, where they might only have 1 hit point and no broken threshold. There are a lot more exceptions to this in super specific instances, whereas materials and special materials both tend to follow the same pattern. Things like spells or really particular items sometimes deviate. I'm pretty sure there's some structure items that deviate from this. Like the things where it's just like, oh yeah, I plop this down and it turns into a house. Sometimes do that. Wall of stone, anything that specifically goes, it has this many hit points and a hardness of this. And usually those do not mention a broken threshold. They can, but they usually don't. The structures usually do, but like the spells usually don't. Spells and their ancillary effects usually have just full HP are destroyed, basically. And now we get into one of the fun ones, counteract modifiers. So items that allow you to counteract effects such as Frostbrand and Rod of Negation, which, look, I've been a bad boy. I have not italicized these. I'm ignoring my own things. Rod of Negation seem to have bonus to the counteract check that follows the progression for weapon potency runes. This does not inherently fall on the same level as a potency rune would be available, because I couldn't determine that. I didn't have enough baseline information to go off of there. So it's kind of like I'm looking at it and I kind of see this pattern, but it could be a false positive. But basically, counteract level or counteract rank and level is based on the item itself, whereas the bonus is a little bit different. And so this is the progression I found, in which first 0 and first level items, which might do some sort of counteracting, you just subtract 10 from the item level DC and you get your bonus. Whereas 2nd to 9th level items, you're likely to do the same, but you're subtracting 9 to get the bonus instead. 10th to 15th, you're subtracting 8. And I think later I did find I made a note about that down here below. We'll get to it. And so 10th to 15th level, it's DC -8, and 16 to and plus is DC -7, with the exception of potentially artifacts. Just because they can do weird things, artifacts can always do weird things. So if the item has other primary or ancillary functions, one might offset this level slightly as balance demands. A 16th level specific weapon using an item DC -8, for example, as with Frostbrand, because the Frostbrand has so much other stuff going on with it, it is a weapon, it does have runes, it does all this other stuff. Despite being 16th level, we treat it basically as if it's 15th, for the sake of determining its counteract bonus. And this was, I figured this out doing a lot of digging. A lot of this I made because I was editing for Sinclair's Library and editing for EOG. And these were things that came up more than once, or that I had to go down a rabbit hole to figure out. So I figured I might as well put it down. So that is for building items. We get on to materials, just standard materials. Unless the hardness of an item is 0, there's a direct relation between hardness, hit points, and broken threshold. This is a fairly hard rule in practice, but it has exceptions in spells and specific effects. I kind of went over this already, but you start with your hardness, and then you go to and then you calculate your broken and hit point from that. And if it has a hardness of 0, there's no broken threshold, and the hit points are 1. This does not apply to things like spells or specific effects that specify hardness and hit points or broken threshold. So like if you're ever worried about like, oh, I want to make a spell or an item that does a thing that has some sort of hardness associated with it, you don't have to use it. You don't have to do this. You can just specify what it does. You can always do that. It's pretty easy. So for precious materials, this one, there's spreads, as you might see. And this was for me breaking down several of the precious materials from the game, and because we were making our own for Sinclair's Library. And so low grade is the base. And even if you have a precious material that doesn't have a low grade version, you still start here with your calculations, because that helps determine what your higher grades are. So low grade, very soft or brittle items, you have a hardness of 0 to 1, thin cloth, thin cloth, thin glass. Soft or brittle items such as leather have 1 to 2 hardness. Middling items such as thin wood have 3 to 4 hardness. Hard items have 4 to 5 hardness, such as thin stone, thin iron, or steel. And very hard items, which are usually not available in low grain, such as adamantine. Standard grade, you go 2 or 3 over the low grade version. There's no consistent rule, but +3 is more common. And this was just due to me figuring that there's some inconsistency in that it might be a bit vibes based. It might actually be standard grade where Paizo starts their calculations from. I'm not sure. In which case, things could be tweaked a little bit more. Tweaked with a little whistle in it. Sometimes an item without a low grade option will have a standard grade item with the statistics listed in the low grade area above. This is pretty rare, but it does happen. So you might have a standard grade item with this very low modifier here. And then high grade is almost exactly, specifically 3 hardness over the standard grade version. Plain and simple. There's probably an exception or two in the game, but I did not find any when I was doing this research before. So average items. So thin items, average items, which is most armors, blocks, tables, unreinforced doors, statues, stuff like that. And we've got our hardness values here. And then basically it's the same pattern. Structures, which is walls of average thickness, reinforced doors, heavy doors, and plated walls. So it is a soft rule that low grade structural objects are higher or better than a standard or than an average item's high grade statistics. So like incredibly soft items have like a hardness of 2 even here. Like if you're looking at like somebody made a wall out of many layers of cloth, it would only have a hardness of 2 still. Now if they like epoxied them together, it'd probably be harder. I didn't find any soft to brittle item data, so I didn't have anything to base that off of. So like I didn't have any leather walls to base this on. Middling items such as wood is 10 and up. Hard items are 14 to 18, just stone, iron, and steel. And very hard items start at 24. There's a question mark on the plus here because I couldn't find anything between 18 and 24. But I imagine it would be very hard would either be 19 to 24 or hard can go higher. And standard grade is +4. This is significantly more consistent than the thin items. And high grade is 6 over the standard grade version. So if you want to ever make a special material of any kind, this is a good baseline for you to go off of. I have a thing on shields here because calculating that for shields, they sort of have their own pattern. But particularly sturdy objects, which is a GM discretional tool, a particularly sturdy item or structure might have even higher hardness and hit points. Certain structures, particularly thick walls, are so reinforced that you have to break them down over time with tools. And this is so you don't just stand there and carve your way through a mountain. You have to, tink, tink, away at it the old-fashioned way. Shields made of precious materials almost universally have a hardness of thin items for their material and grade. So basically, up here, a low-grade shield will be in this range here, generally as a hard or very hard item, sometimes as a middling item. Standard grade will be 2 or 3 higher, and high grade will be 3 higher than that. But bucklers have 2 less hardness than standard shield, and shields usually have hardness associated with a thin item of their. I already said that. Whoops. And this is a common pattern. It's not universal. There are exceptions, especially with specific shields. Specific shields break the mold very consistently in terms of that. Unless they just say, oh, it's a iron shield, but also has this ability. Almost all specific shields will put out that they have their own hardness and hit points, which can completely ignore all of this. So in various other writings, when writing a save effect with a binary outcome, nothing on success, effect on a failure, and perhaps a parenthetical or additional bit on a crit fail, the wording is generally as follows. You must succeed a type of save, which is capitalized, and then you insert the DC, and then the outcome. That's like what happens. And then a parenthetical, sometimes this is actually also divided with a semicolon, or sometimes it is just a comma, or sometimes it's a separate sentence. But this is probably the most condensed way of doing it most of the time. Those saves with multiple or complex outcomes generally must attempt a save. insert proper DC if necessary, and then you'll have like below that you'll have your critical success and whatnot. Critical success, success, failure, critical failure. And then you can have the inline, so basic saves must attempt a basic blank save or DC. Uh-oh, out of memory. Not good. Where's all my memory going? Why is my RAM disappearing? Who ate my RAM? Who ate my RAM? Seriously, what's going on? Spotify, you bastard. Why do you need 2 gigs of RAM? There's no reason for that. There's no reason for that, Spotify. Why do you do that? Now my chat's broken and everything. I wonder if I can get it to refresh with F5. No? Maybe I can break it down and reload it. No? My chat's broken. No, the window on my OBS, the chat window. Okay, so yeah, Spotify decided that it wanted to just eat 2.5 gigs of RAM for no reason. And also my my dark screen reader broke as well. There we go. Yeah, it was hungry. Spotify gets hungry. All those people that pay it money for premium and stuff, it's not enough. It's just not. They've got to consume the RAM too. I don't know why it does. It just does that sometimes. It'll go, everything's fine. We're at like 200-ish megs. And then suddenly 2 gigs, 2+ gigs. Whoops. So we've got back down here. We're almost done. When writing basic saves, it's generally as follows: must attempt a basic save, DC, and you insert the appropriate DC. So must attempt a basic will save. Yeah, this is available. I've put it on Reddit before, I think, but I will also put it in the video description and on YouTube when this is up on YouTube, and I'll probably repost it a few places afterwards. It's not exhaustive. There's so much to the game, and like this is mostly about writing style more than like how to design things, but I figured it's what I'd start out with while I waited to see if anybody would come in. And then So saves do not need to have DCs expounded in spells or in other sections that already predetermine the saves in other text. However, most feats, special abilities, and other non-spells generally need to be formatted in the following way. Replacing insert proper save DC if necessary above. So against your class DC, against your spell DC, against your class or DC or spell DC, whichever is higher, against your skill DC, or DC with a specific value, which is more common in items than anything. And so like this is all just good practice for writing. Some of this is for designing. So like the building items section here is mostly about design. If you're making some items about like you're making vehicles, siege weapons, special materials, and there's some formatting stuff. But I also just want to sort of delve into random stuff here on archives. Key mastery. Let's see if we can find a creature, because creatures are one of the things I like messing with a lot. And we can explore some of the design space. So I am going to limit sources because let's see, sources and spoilers. I will restrict myself currently to Monster Core, just so that we're keeping current and we can take a few looks at some things that I might not have actually taken a close look at yet. You to get fresher eyes. So let's see here. Scribbity. Okay, animated armor. A pretty familiar creature. We did have this in Legacy. They're a mindless construct, and they are perhaps the first instance of construct armor making the most sense in 2e. Which, for anyone unfamiliar, construct armor is a special ability that some constructs have, particularly ones that are armored, as the name might imply. So, basically, I think most animated objects have this as well. The animated armor is part of that creature family. Ow, I just hit my knee. We're gonna have an ad in about 3 minutes. But basically, animated armor is got AC 17 and 13 when broken. This is a pretty solid pattern across construct armor, is that the difference is 4 points of AC. There's nothing saying you have to do that. So if you want to create something that's got only +2 when its armor's up and it only makes it a little weaker, you can do that, but there is a reason. There is a reason that it's 4 points most of the time. So building creatures. If we come down here to building creatures, we know the animated armor is level 2. And we're going to find our armor class right here. So it's level 2 and it has 17 AC. It goes down to 13, which is lower than low AC for its level. Part of the reason for this is here at level 2, it has hardness 9, which is a lot of damage reduction. So they don't want it to be too hard to hit. At higher levels, this tends to taper off a little bit unless it's like made of adamantine or something, because unlike creatures with resistances, Construct armor tends to have a hardness appropriate to the materials, which can be significantly higher than resistance at the level or significantly lower. So you'll actually see this reflected in where its AC sits a lot of the time. Oop, I didn't mean to hit that. So this one has a moderate AC, partially because it's low level. They don't want to completely overwhelm you. This thing is going to be basically sitting there taking no damage whatsoever from most of the party, because hardness does apply to all damage. But it is not the same as resistance all damage, and I will get into that. So hardness, there is no official stance statement where hardness applies in the damage step, like when you're calculating damage. But the only place it makes sense is at the very end, because crap, I'm getting sidetracked. Basically, I'll come back to this. But we got 20 hit points, which building creatures, hit points, level 2 is pretty low. It's the bottom end of low. This is another counteracting point to its extremely high resistance to damage. You'll see that a lot. Creatures that have abnormally high resistances, a ton of immunities, super fast regeneration, or crazy high ACs will usually have less hit points. And the inverse is true. If something's got a really crap AC, no resistances, and no regen or fast healing or something, will usually have higher hit points. Unless it's like a really powerful spellcaster or something. Then, like, right above powerful spellcasters, you have brutes, which are like barbarian-esque in the way that they're high damage, but they're kind of glass cannon-y. And brutes come in two flavors, which are on opposite sides of the HP spectrum. You've got your true glass cannon ones, which are moderately easy to hit, not too many hit points, usually moderate to low, and just deal a crap ton of damage. They usually don't have the highest to hit, but it's enough that they can hit, but they're less likely to crit by a long margin. And then you've got your meat bag brute, which usually have more consistent damage slightly, or at least more consistent to hit, and that has a tendency to balance out. They usually won't have a very high AC, moderate usually, and then they'll have like good damage, good hit, and like almost every creature, they'll have special abilities. But part of the design space too is knowing your level. So this is a creature level 2. Let's see, can I? What the? Oh. I got another out of memory thing. Are you eating me, Spotify, again? No? Okay. But basically, sorry. So animated armor here, level 2. It's got a lot of immunities. It's got no special resistances, but it does have hardness. And so they're trying not to go too hard right here. You've got a moderate AC, which goes to below when broken. Construct armor is listed over here, past the other defensive stuff, which I don't know if that was true in the pre-master version. It was in a different order in the pre-master version, so they've changed the formatting slightly, which I don't think is a bad thing. So you've got AC saves, and then ancillary abilities related to one of these two things. In that order. Seems nice. Basically, this creature is a tutorial on construct armor for the players. It goes, hey, if you reduce it to 10 hit points or you crit it, it gets a lot easier to hit. It becomes shitty. And it halves its hardness, which, unless stated otherwise, halving rounds down. So it goes from 9 hardness and 17 AC to 4 hardness and 13. It still has resistance to damage. So basically all damage, but much easier to overcome after the halfway point. Construct armor is basically a false second health bar. Like, if you think about it in video game terms, whenever you've got an enemy that, like, they've got 2 health bars, you beat down the first one, and then suddenly they change in some way. This one doesn't get a new move set, but it does get quicker to kill. There's a formatting error here on the website. It seems where I don't know if that's in the book or not, but it has a glaive and a gauntlet attack. Those are not the same thing. Pretty straightforward. The one thing that I would say is maybe unusual here is that their attacks are magical. And this is because they're animated, not because they've got runes. As you'll notice, there's not an items section, but reasonably speaking, you could pick its glaive up after the fact. You could pick its gauntlets up after the fact. You might even be able to repair the armor it's made from after the fact. But, you know, the GM's well within their rights to go, it's broken. Because it was part of the creature. But that just because it's a low level, and in building creatures, there's minimum level that a creature should be before it provides you items of a particular level. Here, level 3 or lower can give you level 0 items. So while this animated armor might be full plate, the full plate is probably destroyed as part of destroying the animated armor. However, the glaive is a level 0 item. It can very easily hand that out. It's not going to break anything. Speaking of these guidelines are for mass-produced, quote-unquote, creatures. Unique creatures ignore this, generally. Uncommon, rare, or common, uncommon, and even rare creatures follow this, unless they're specific to... hey, Phoenix. Hello. Thank you for lurking. So, while unique creatures can ignore this because they're one of a kind, and... yeah, I'll make a tea. While specific creatures will, or unique creatures will ignore this because they are generally for an adventure or something, or they don't have items at all. They're not going to upset the progression of a game. So creature design, the reason this table exists and stuff is because if you're putting a creature out there to just be thrown into a game, you don't want to give it equipment that could upset the game's balance. You want the GM to give it equipment. And that's true. Like here, the animated armor. Yeah, it's got a glaive. If you want that glaive to be +1 striking, it can be. You can use that to award an item that is not listed to the party. It doesn't even have to make it stronger. I mean, you could. You could make this, say, you could put elite on the animated armor, make it level 3. And maybe instead of giving it +2 to damage here, you make it 2d8 because it's got a +1 striking glaive. Something like that. But we are going to take a quick break so I can make Tracy some ginger tea. He's not feeling well. We will be right back. We are back. All right. So, I think what I was talking about before was items on creatures. So, I would find it perfectly reasonable for you to be able to retrieve the glaive and gauntlets no longer magical from an animated armor. It's also reasonable that the GM says those are part of it. It was destroyed. They're destroyed. But they can also equip these animated armors with more stuff, magical stuff that they can give to the party. So many creatures don't have any items listed, yet they have items. And it's just up to the GM. It's a difference in between creature design and adventure design. So adventure design, part of that is placing loot, which includes on enemies. So, say your party is level 1, and there's a fight. It's a big fight with some animated armors. It's already going to be a little tough because they're higher level. So this is going to be a decent challenge for them. Say there's 2 animated armors and 1 elite animated armor, like a big boss fight. Hey, Deathy, thanks for subbing. Welcome back to the stream. Thank you very much. We're talking about design today. I went over some unspoken rules and guidelines for writing stuff, as well as some guidelines for building items of certain kinds earlier. But now we're going through just random creatures and the creature levels off screen. Let me see if I can do this right quick. Oh, I see what's happening. Hold on. Give me just a moment. Oh no, it did it again. Crap. Okay, there we go. So I hope you enjoy the link to Battles You stuff. Yes, thank you very much. I did see that earlier, but I was cooking. I appreciate it quite a bit. I will peruse those at some point, hopefully soon. I do have a tendency to get distracted. Oop, I pressed a thing again. But yes, encounter design versus or adventure design versus creature design. I guess I could talk about the difference between creature, encounter, and adventure design. So, creature design is the most broad, technically, in terms of you have to think about the most things. Good way to cool down. Yeah. Hey, farmers markets are good. I wish we had some here where we lived. You'd think there would be, given how many farmers there are, but nope. So creatures, you have to account for the most possibilities because you can throw a creature anywhere. It doesn't necessarily even have to make sense. You can throw a creature anywhere, which is why things like the safe items table exists. Because if you create a creature with an item that's say we gave this boy here, the animated armor, a +1 weapon. It's like an appropriate leveled item for the creature, but not for every adventure or every encounter. And that's because if you start handing out +1 weapons every time you fight an animated armor, you're going to be giving the party a lot of money early on, a lot of resources, which can be fine. Like, it depends on your game. Like, if that's where all their money is coming from early on, that's fine, as long as you're trying to keep it balanced. Generally speaking, in 2E, giving too much is fine. You just don't want to give too little. Like, let's see. Let's do the treasure by level, I think. Treasure by level, yeah. So the party right here wants to make 170 gold pieces worth. Alchemists can burn their money like crazy, but part of the reason they have free items every day is so that they don't burn through it quite as badly. Honestly, mages and alchemists both spend a lot of money on either spells or formulas early on because that pays off for them later, or even relatively quickly. But yeah, an alchemist, even at level 1, I think they've got a decent amount of reagents, so they just have a capacity issue early on. But the new alchemist, they've said, has like renewable. I play one in PFS. I've never played in Pathfinder Society, but I know it's a lot stricter. They go by raw a lot, and they also have, I think, a few like additional rules that just broadly the game doesn't have, but that mostly revolves around like uncommon options, I think. Like you earn tokens to buy uncommon options, quote unquote. Yeah, that's the benefit of it, is like 99.9% of everything's going to be the same PFS table to PFS table, especially the more official ones. Like there's always going to be some variance that's just dependent on like we're humans and or other ancestries, and we have different interpretations and fuck ups and or just different vibes. But it's as structured as it can be. I've just never lived anywhere where there was PFS, and I was never into it enough to do it online. I always did homebrew worlds and such. So like, the way that, let's take the animated armor again, is you can take the creature design, which does not grant any items. Technically speaking, the glaive and the gauntlets are part of it, and it gets destroyed when you reduce it to 0. Encounter design wise, one step up, the GM can say, okay, the glaives and the gauntlets, you can retrieve those. They're usable, but the plate mail that it's made out of, you fucked it up too bad. And then maybe a level later or so, or one of these things over the course of the level that you kill is intact enough to repair and give that level 1 armor. Or maybe if you're level 2, you've got an animated armor that's actually made out of fortress plate, which I think is a level 2 item. And so you can give them that. Encounter design has a few stages to it. One, you look at like how much XP you're going to spend, how difficult the encounter is going to be. But after that, you look at the creatures you're putting in it, and if you're going to give them items, if you're going to give them loot, if you're going to modify anything. For example, animated armor, it's very sensible that, you know, they're kind of like the armor that stands in the hallway situation, you know, the decorative armor. So they've got a pole arm and they've got gauntlets because of course they do. They're a full suit of armor. But you can also alter them for your event. Yeah, I hope it's helpful. I like talking a lot about design and stuff, so I do hope this helps you. But sort of the thing you think of with an animated armor, and I think in Legacy it had an artwork, is it's probably full plate, and it has a pole arm, and it can punch you. And that's basically all it does. It doesn't have any special abilities other than construct armor. Like I was talking about earlier, this is sort of a tutorial creature. It teaches you about construct immunities, and it teaches you about construct armor, which, especially if those are going to be prevalent in your campaign, great creature for that. It's not too strong for level 1, but it is going to be a challenge at level 1 when you're dealing, on average, as a marshal that hits hard, probably like 10 damage on average, maybe a little higher. And so with this hardness of 9, it's going to slow down that fight quite a bit. But a lucky hit will be better, and critting shows you that they have a particular weakness. And so it's great for that. So in counter design, you maybe have some weaker minions, or like the animated broom or something, which you could reflavor into something else, just so that you have these little minions. And then the big bad animated armor is sort of the mini boss of that fight. But you can also alter them. One of these parts of encounter design is including variation. So while this does make for a perfectly acceptable, like, you've got 4 of these, they are in the hallway, and when you reach the middle of the hallway, they animate and defend their master's home or their creator's home, whatever. And they all have the same equipment because they're copy pasted ornaments, basically. They don't have to be. They don't even have to like have the ideal physical structure. Like, part of the reason people think full plate is because full plate is very full bodied. But a thing I'd like to, if anybody's ever seen anybody's ever played Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain, or Legacy of Kain, Blood Omen, whichever way around it goes. There's like a haunted armor guy, and he's basically a helmet, a breastplate, some shin guards, and like bam braces. He doesn't even have gauntlets, but he does have a weapon. And so you could do that. He could be half plate. He could be breastplate with a helmet, and just little accents like that. They could have different weapons. They could have a shield, which is actually quite good here. If you want a more defensive one, they've only got a moderate AC. So giving them a shield could raise them up to 19. And then you've got to break both their shield and their armor if you give it shield block. But they don't have shield block by default, and they don't need it. So you break through their armor, and maybe they can still defend a little bit better, but at that point, they're still just at low AC. So it's a variation you can do. Reach is just very good for them because they don't want to be right on top of your marshal, because your marshal's likely to crit. But the gauntlets are there because they are useful and they're agile. But you could give these things axes, you could give them clubs, you could reflavor them or switch them around. And that's all without actually going into, I'm actually going to change the loot. because once again, their weapons are part of them. You can destroy them as part of the creature die. But then encounter design, we've got treasure by level here. So across the course of level 1, you're supposed to award approximately 175 gold worth of stuff to the party as a whole. And this goes up if you got a bigger party, or down if you have a smaller party. But is it in the same page? It is not. Okay, so treasure. Maybe it's on this page. Okay, so this is your treasure for starting a new character at a particular level. You can use this as a guideline to see, well, what should an individual character have over the course of level 1. So like if you're in the middle of something, like of course everybody only starts with 15 gold at level 1, but by level 2 they should each have a first level permanent item and 20 gold. So it's not unreasonable if you're gonna have some animated armors that one of them isn't completely destroyed, that you can repair its full plate, and it's perfectly reasonable to award that to the party for as many people as want it. There's also, we don't have the per encounter one here. Okay, so treasure per encounter. Treasure by encounter. Okay. So this is a guideline to help you determine how much money you should put into a singular encounter's worth of loot. Now there's guidelines up here that it talks about, where it's like some battles just aren't going to have loot, plain and simple. So what you do is you take the loot from that encounter and you put it into a pool. And that pool can be for a later encounter, or it can be part of the reward for completing the quest. And so that's sort of go kill the rats in the basement. Like the rats aren't gonna drop, 18 gold worth of loot. Maybe the proprietor's like, I'll give you a free room and board for a week to the whole party, and that's like, it's like 2 silver a day for each person. But generally speaking, like, you can waive little stuff like that, just because that's more of a boon than it is loot, treasure. And this is about treasure. So you can be like, maybe they find some good info, but they don't really get any money out of it. They get free room and board for a little while, which saves them some money. But it's going to be like 5 or 6 gold probably overall. And if you want to calculate that in, you can. But once again, it's better to do more than it is to do too little. I've run plenty where like the suggested party wealth is absolutely blown out of the water, and it doesn't really upset anything. The main thing you want to try and not do is give too many things that are just going to turn the game easy, or put caveats on them somehow. Like, you can absolutely go, here's a level 16 sword at level 1. And it's going to make the early game very easy, but it's not going to really break the game. Because it's like +4 or +3 to hit. It deals a lot of damage. It's going to one-shot quite a few things at level 1. Now, where it gets a lot more iffy is, oh, well, it also creates a cone of fire with DC 36 basic reflex save and 10d6 damage. That's going to break the game. You have to be considerate of some of those things, but straight bonuses are usually like more of an easy mode than a breaking thing. So you can give like heightened weapons and such. You can take things away too. Just don't be a dick about it. Like you retrieved Excalibur. Well, you got to give it to the king at some point. So something like that, you know. And if your players run off with Excalibur, it's a divine blade. Maybe it gets angry. And it's just like, no, you can't have my power. I'm acting like a level 1. I'm acting like a +1 striking weapon. No holy rune for you. Hand out cursed items. So cursed items, there's a reason. If you look at cursed items in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you will notice they do not have a price. They have a level, and that's to approximate their power, because a lot of them have DCs and things like that, but they don't have a price, and that serves 2 functions. Function 1, you can't craft something that does not have a price. I found out that a while back is, per the rules of crafting, if it does not have a price, you can't make it. Of course, the GM can give things a price and whatnot, but handing out cursed items, personally, I like making cursed items that aren't just shit. Even if you have craft anything. Yeah, even if you have craft anything, it's one of the smaller nuances of crafting that can protect, I guess, the game design from allowing a player to just go like, yeah, I make that. I made that. It's the reason artifacts don't have prices. Because if you gave an artifact a price, it could be crafted, plain and simple. Now, as GM, you're perfectly within your rights to allow somebody to try to, but that sort of thing is generally the best is like, well, you have to go get these really special things and make a quest out of that in of itself. And I think it was in Treasure Vault where they introduced some better guidelines for quest crafting, but that sort of thing. But back to cursed items, sorry. Cursed items, there's a few types of cursed items. There are shitty cursed items, and I don't mean that as in they're poorly designed. I mean that like they're just a bad thing. They're just a bad thing. They do nothing good. They are just annoying, and effectively what those are is a remove curse check. So if you give those at too high a level, it's just going to get removed. If you give them at too low a level, it's going to be a huge pain in the ass. Generally, the sweet spot for it is you give them an over-leveled cursed item. That's not too detrimental. Like, you don't want to, oh, it deals fucking 4d8 fire damage to you every round until you could get rid of it. That's going to kill them. But, like, say they've got the Stone of Weight, I think it is. Hand out the Monkey's Paw. Okay. So Monkey's Paw is both an artifact and a cursed item, if I remember correctly. Monkey's Paw. Oh no, it's not a artifact. That's surprising. Okay. So rare, cursed, magical, misfortune. All right. So I just turned up my volume. That hurts. Okay. So you've got the shitty ones, which are only bad. You've got tempting ones, which I'm gonna guess the Monkey's Paw is. I haven't read it yet. Where it's just like, it's bad. It's real bad for you, but look, a good thing. And then you've got really tempting magical items or niche cursed items, where it's just like, in a certain situation, they're the best thing ever. Outside of that, they might suck really bad. And spell, I think it's called Spell Cutter, is a good example of that, I think, where its curse is rough. Like, depending on the situation you're in, its curse is really rough, but it's a good weapon. So it's really tempting, even if you know that it's cursed, to still pick it up. So let's look at the monkey's paw and see where it fits. Used in one hand, it's bulk L, makes sense. Dried hand gnarled and clenched into a fist, waiting for a creature to pick it up. When you pick up the monkey's claw, the hand opens, revealing 3 withered fingers. Grants you 3 wishes, the effects of a success on a wish ritual null. So there's some sort of error here. Oh yeah, I can't remember his name, but I know which one you're talking about. Curling 1 finger after each one. Once you pick it up, you cannot discard the hand until it returns to a clenched fist by granting its 3 wishes. So this right here is one of the downsides of many cursed items, is you can't get rid of them until the curse is broken or certain conditions are met. I'll go into that a little bit more here in a little bit, if I don't forget. Any attempts to discard the hand, even with the effects of a wish ritual, are unsuccessful, and the monkey's paw reappears within your possessions within 1d4 hours. This is generally how I handle that, like, if you try to get rid of the cursed item, although some of them become bonded to you, and, like, you literally can't put them down. Several cursed weapons are like that, where you cannot put them down under any circumstances. You can be disarmed of them, technically, but under no willing circumstance can you be rid of them. And generally, they'll still just come back to you. It doesn't work for any other creature in the intervening time. The hand returns even if another creature steals it from you. Once you make all 3 wishes, the monkey's paw uses interplanar teleport to travel to a random point in the multiverse. So then that sounds like a wish. That sounds like a wish, even if you don't use the words "I wish." Activates and grants a twisted, horrifying version of your wish, producing any effect with the possibility of a wish ritual and potentially greater effect at the GM's discretion. So this one's actually very, very easy on the GM. It's very forgiving because there's nothing hard on it at all. It makes a twisted, horrifying version of the wish, which you control the power of. You control how strong this is. I think you said they were level 8 or something, right? Or was it 18? So 1, wish isn't too crazy. 15. Okay, so wish is a little up there for them, but it's nothing too crazy. Say they would, I wish we had a dragon fighting on our side. You make the dragon an appropriate level, for their adventure. And yeah, the dragon fights on their side and then regards them, like comes in, blasts whatever's there, and then it's just like, now my servants, whatever, like it turns into its own problem. Or if they're like, I wish I had, 10 tons of gold. Give them a reflex save before you drop it on them. That sort of thing. You control the twist. You control the horrific version. You control the power. The more specific they are with the wish, like if they're trying to needle their way out of it, pick it apart. You whatever you can to just fuck that up. Like this is probably one of the easier cursed items to manage. Just because, 1, it's up to them to use it or not. It does not force them to use it unless they want to get rid of it. And of course, I think the monkey's thing is that it knows where it is and it's looking for it. So they probably want to use it. But it's going to make bad things happen. So you're basically creating semi-ad-lib plot points for them to avoid this creature. Because I think the paws monkey is level 20. It's something. So he's probably a bigger threat than whatever you would throw at them for the wish, because you control the wish. Like beyond its wording, you control it. So they're like, I wish I was the richest person in the world. probably don't destroy the entirety of the universe's economy by just making everyone else poorer than them. But you could also don't be afraid to punify their wishes. I wish I was the richest person in the world. Okay. Nothing seems to change to you. The next time something bites them, they start getting bonuses. Start with, yeah. I mean, I think that's reasonable. What was it? Treasure by level 15. Yeah, that's reasonable. Is like party would be like normally 5,000, but again, like usually starting at higher levels, it's better to give a little extra, just because you do ultimately accrue more wealth throughout the course of an adventure than you do starting flat. But yeah, so like if they're like, I wish to be the richest person in the world, and they taste rich, right? So now something bites them and they're like, ooh, you're tasty, and they're gonna focus down that person and try to eat them. You could even make their flesh addicting, like something like that. Like most wishes can be twisted. Took party wealth and did extra party member. Oh, gotcha. So like that's a good amount. But the thing with like twisted wishes is there are so many words that are either homophones or homonyms of other words, and the monkey's paw doesn't have to use the correct context. It just doesn't. Like if they say, I wish I was the prince of the kingdom, you don't even have to like take anything out of context there. You just, you don't give them exactly what they want. Either being the prince or becoming the prince is something horrible and horrific, because something like, oh yeah, you become the prince because you just usurped the king, or your father or mother just usurped the king. Yeah, it has its issues. This is very much a in the hands of the GM hitman target. Yeah, that too. Like it produces a great number of problems. But this is very much a in the hands of the GM sort of situation, so it's good. You don't have to worry about it so much. Some of them can be annoying, like was it Stone of Weight or something? Oops. Stone of Weight. Yeah. This is one of the lower level cursed items. It's only level 2. The lodestone, small stone, appears non-magical and has a lovely sheen, giving the impression that it could be valuable or notable item or magic stone of some kind. When you carry it for 1 minute, its curse activates. It does not change size, but it increases in weight to 5 bulk. It does not cause it to deal more damage when used as a weapon, and it reappears in your possessions within 1 minute if you discard it. Can't be destroyed or thrown away permanently, or even placed in a container that would reduce or negate its bulk, like a bag of holding, until the subject of a removed curse spell or similar magic effect. Once the curse activates for the first time, the stone fuses to you. And fuses is a term that specifically applies to cursed objects. That just means you're the curse's target. This could mean that you can't discard it. So it says it appears within your possessions within 1 minute if you discard it. But like if we look at Spell Cutter, for example, I don't think it mentions Spellcutter Fusion. So like Spellcutter here does not fuse to you. You can put it down, you can get rid of it. But it's a very powerful weapon. It's level 17. It's a +2 greater striking adamantine longsword. And you can use it to beat undead and construct. But it does nothing to living beings, period. Exceptions apply to things with negative healing like Dampiers. So there's no real negative effect here. And I think maybe that's possibly because it is from an adventure path. Oh, hello, Phoebe Bane. Welcome. Thank you for the follow. I am flabbergasted. Welcome. We're just talking about game design and stuff, specifically at the moment about cursed objects, and how they interact and stuff. So like Spellcutter here doesn't fuse to you, which I think kind of belittles its curse a little. Its curse is basically you can't hurt living things with it, which gives it actually a really good use as something you can give someone at a much lower level than the item. At which its biggest benefit is that it's adamantine and +2 greater striking. But you can't hurt living things. And there's going to be some semantics around living creatures, because like, well, can I cut a tree with it? A tree's not a creature unless it's, you know, an animated tree or something. I personally tend to go with it's alive, you can't hurt it, but that's going to probably vary GM to GM. But like the main thing here is that you can put it away, and that's the weakest part of its curse is that, well, I'm done using this for its specific purpose of killing undead and construct. Is a slime a living creature? Generally, yes, unless it's undead. Slimes may be mindless, but they are generally organic or elemental matter that is alive. And they will generally have a soul, albeit if you ask a daemon, a very low quality one. And which one of the funny semantic points is that most dead things are alive in second edition. So there's specifically undead and ghosts, and then there are phantoms. But then everything that's not undead or just dead is alive, or exception of being constructs. But they don't have a soul. If I remember correctly, oozes do. They are just mindless. They just have the least sort of dregs of a soul. It's sort of like the crappiest thing that a daemon will probably just use as a snack. What book was it from? The Littlest Sippy. Yeah. So this is actually coming from first edition, but there's nothing counteracting it in second edition. Sword Art Align Unbridged. I've only seen some of the Sword Art Online. Or wait, SOA. That's not Sword Art Online. That would be SAO. What's SOA? Or did you mean SOA or SAO? I I haven't seen enough of it anyway. Either way. That's what you meant. Okay. I haven't seen enough of it. I've watched Dragon Ball Z Abridged plenty of times, but I haven't gotten all the way through Sword Art Online. But yeah, basically everything except machines have souls unless specified otherwise. And even some machines have souls, like automatons. They are constructs, but they have souls and are specifically living. And those two things are separate. Like, they tend to collate, but undead have souls. Or at least intelligent undead have souls. Unintelligent undead are kind of more like they're made out of souls, but like in a ripped up and used as materials sort of way. So yeah, pretty much everything is living except for undead and constructs and things that are just dead material. So like, if you kill somebody and they've got a body on the ground, that body is dead. It's not living. So you could mess it up with Spellcutter, but you could not put them in that state with Spellcutter. An ooze you could hit, a construct, it wouldn't do anything unless they specified otherwise. But if a demon comes along, maybe even say the same person that you just killed comes along as a demon, you could kill them too, because demons are alive. They have reached the next stage of life, basically. All outsiders are living in some degree, unless, again, stated otherwise. Like if they're undead, like the I forget their new name, but Nightshades sort of thing, Nightwave, Nightshade, those things that are like outsider undeads, devourers, that sort of thing. And I've thusly got way off track because we were talking about animated armor. And I've lost my shoe somewhere. There it is. So a thing that I was talking about way earlier that I said I'd get back to, and I swear if I don't, I'm going to forget again, is hardness versus resistance to all damage. Hardness is weaker and also applies at a different step, at least according to my best inferences. So basically, resistance to all damage, let's say the animated armor has 3 variations. We've got one with hardness, one with resistance to all damage, and one with both. So the one with hardness, you pool all your damage together at the end, all the damage that would be applied to it. So let's say it's going to take 15 damage. It's a combination of fire and slashing damage. It's going to take 15 damage. It's just going to, anything that triggers off those damages is going to trigger. And then it's just going to take 9 less, like to its hit points. And that's how hardness works. Whereas resistance all, say it has resistance all 5. And now it matters how much of what damage you dealt. Because let's say you dealt 4 fire damage and 11 slashing damage. Well, that fire damage is getting reduced to 0 before it gets applied to you. So, and then your slashing damage separately is going to get reduced again by 5 to 6. So all not only applies to all damage, but separately to each damage. And that separate damage, so resistance to all is much stronger, because if you do have split damage types, it's going to reduce iteratively. So like if you've got a flaming frost shock weapon, your fire, electricity, and cold damage and your physical damage are all individually getting reduced, whereas the hardness is only going to apply once to the entire pool of damage. And then the one that has both, let's go back with, 4 fire and 11 slashing. So you're going to reduce fire to 0 automatically. You're going to reduce 11 to 6 with the 5 from resist all. And then you're going to reduce that 6 down to 0 with the hardness of 9. So hardness applies in a separate step. The hard part about hardness is it's not actually explicitly stated when it applies. You kind of have to suss it out and logically deduce when it applies, which is at the end of determining damage. Hardness is just think of hardness almost as a form of temporary hit points in the way it applies to you. So if you're taking a bunch of damage, the hardness applies after everything else because it cannot determine what type of damage is being dealt. And that's important for the other steps. The other steps have to know what type of damage is being dealt, whether it's your immunities, resistances, or weaknesses, for that number to be modified. And it's only once all the numbers are pooled together and what type of damage is there no longer matters that hardness should be applied. This is not an official ruling, but it's the only way that makes sense, because if you take hardness and you apply it, say, before weaknesses and resistances, or you apply it to the front end, because it does not individually reduce each damage the way that resist all does. If you've got hardness 9 and you've dealt 10 damage, 5 of it fire and 5 of it slashing to this thing, and it has weakness to fire, how do you know which one you reduced? You don't. That's the thing. So hardness only makes sense at the end. Which is also why immunity and resistances on shields, which are rare but do exist, matter. So, although there is still a weird question there. So, like, if your shield is immune to fire, does it block all of the fire damage for you? Is a big question. I lean towards no, because it's the one that's immune to the fire. But it is a good question. And I can actually lean either way on it, because like if you have a reflexive shield and you pull up a fireproof shield between you and a dragon's fire breath, could it block it all? And like part of me wants to say yes, and part of me wants to say no. Because honestly, how often does that come up? How often is that going to be a thing? And it's really cool to be like the person standing there with your shield up and you just, there's this big bubble of fire around you and you're like, nah, bitch. So, honestly, I could go either way on that specifically. It's its own weird question. But shields also deal with hardness in a slightly different order because they apply them. You and your shield take damage separately. It just basically gives you hardness. And which is the reason that I sort of do tend to lean towards, nah, that's not how it works. It's just not going to take the damage at all. Because basically it's, okay, there's 45 damage. Your shield reduces the damage by, let's say, 5 for you and for the shield. Then and then the shield has its immunities and resistances, but those only apply to it taking damage, not to you taking damage. So it says, okay, you have hardness 5 for this damage. So you apply your weaknesses and resistances and then reduce by 5. And I've gone on a tangent, but it was at least the correct tangent. Is there anything that anybody in chat would like to discuss? Points of design on? I can go look at something else, or I can just go pick another random creature to explore its design. I'm gonna take a drink while waiting. Not seeing nothing in chat, so we're gonna go pick another creature. And let's load remaining 2,000 something. And I will try to avoid picking creatures that are in adventure paths, just because the stuff in adventure paths, Spellcutter is a good example, tend to bend the rules, or bend the guidelines, not the rules, bend the guidelines of design a little bit, just because, like I was saying earlier, there's 3 stages to a creature. There's creature design, encounter design, and adventure design. And when you're writing an adventure, you can build a creature from the point of view of that adventure. And it does not have to always obey all the same guidelines as one made for just general adventuring, like would be found in Monster Core. So let's see. I'm not sure what this is, so let's look at the Azuretsi. Azuretsi are sinuous serpentine creatures with dagger sharp teeth, covered in brilliant blue scales and mottled purple and pink highlights that shimmer in a periodolic approximation of leering, laughing faces. Maelstrom's chaotic forces spawn these small proteins from various sources: physical mating between ultra Azuretis, the paradoxical promotions of bestial non-nets, and possibly from mortal petitioners, though these Azuretsis may just be confusing putative mortal memories with experiences gained from games of mimicry. Never expect Azuretsis to operate by any rational, self-consistent rules. Okay, so they're Proteans. So let's take a look at them. Proteans are always a little weird by their nature, which is good. Protean anatomy is one of the standard things, is after they take acid, electricity, or sonic damage, they gain resistance to that type of damage for 1 hour until it switches types. So they basically got a shifting resistance, and that helps them survive in Maelstrom, because well, Maelstrom is gonna fuck you up otherwise. It's barely better than the Abyss. It is just, instead of being malicious, it is uncaring. So entropy sense. So they've got an imprecise sense that is just based off of chance. So they can tell you're there because you might be there, which is maybe one of the most powerful senses I've seen. It does have a specific counteraction with Veil of Privacy, which allows you to block them without a check, which is good. So anytime you make something that's so vaguely powerful, it's good to have some sort of semi-specific but also accessible means of counteracting it when it's not like, you can be more specific in an adventure, like if you're like, oh yes, you must have the lenses of Abandengo to see through this or whatever, or to do something. But here it's a general creature. It's from Monster Core. So Veil of Privacy is a rank 3 spell, which chances are, if you're same or greater level than it, level 5, you'll be fine. You'll have that. You can have that. If these are going to be frequent in your game, you might, let your party know, hey, there's going to be a lot more Proteans. You might want to prepare things to deal with them. Or let them figure it out on their own. Just, strike that balance. Spell Pilfer. Creature with an active spell effect within 30 feet fails to resist another Azure sees Mocking Touch. I like that. That is encouraging a type of teamwork or synergy between multiple creatures. You don't see this enough, I think, where there are abilities that are dependent on another allied creature doing something. Partially because, one, it takes up space, and if you're fighting the thing on its own, meh, it's never going to use it because it's on its own. But like, say over the course of a few levels where these things go from like nearly a boss monster to sort of a minion, it's a nice little evolution of their abilities. So you go from them just being what was initially some sort of powerhouse against you to having to be a little sneakier and a little weirder, and working together. And so they get to attempt to literally just pickpocket a spell out of you, or a spell effect off of you. So I hope if you have what's it called, the mage armor or its new equivalent, like it just goes, I have more AC, or if you got false life on, you give it it takes your temporary hit points and gives it to itself, that sort of thing. They can fly, swim, and slither. They have unfettered movement constantly. So basically, you cannot immobilize them. They will just break out. They can escape as a free action. Although it is, what's the constant? It's constant fourth. So if it's a higher level spell, or a rank spell, you can lock them down. So fifth or higher level spells, but at that point, like, these things would be nothing to you, effectively. They got pretty standard spread of attacks: jaws, claws, and tail. They're small. They do a lot of damage on that tail for small, especially with reach. Building creatures. Let's see. To hit. Plus 13 is moderate, so not crazy high or anything. So you got 13 here. So they have moderate to hit on the tail, which deals more damage and has grab. And reach. It's a bit much, in my opinion. You've got lower damage here from agile. So you have an agile, which generally drops your damage by 1 stage. And then you've got jaws, which are finesse, but not agile, and have a little more damage. I think, personally, a thing that's missing here is the consideration that reach off, especially extreme reach on a smaller creature, usually also comes with a slight decrease to damage. So this being closer to this damage would probably be appropriate. I do like that they are remaining consistent in their flat damage and modifying it with the dice. So they're changing their average damage while maintaining a more consistent flat damage. Add-ons like plus grab usually also impact damage to some degree, but it can vary. They've got constrict, which leans into it as well, but you're also going to disable this highly damaging attack by grappling somebody with it. It's a tail. I think they only have one. Most of the time they only have one. I think there is one Protean that has 2 tails, but it's going to be able to constrict you to deal extra damage, but it is going to have to focus down on you. So mimic form basically gets changed shape, but it has to be a creature they can see, and they have to make a perception check to do it. I like that. Can transform into the same creature again without a check, but can retain details of only one specific appearance at a time. So yeah, I like that. It's a nice little trickster thing, and they're Proteans. They're tricksy. Mocking Touch. This is the thing that triggers Spell Pilfer if another one does it. So let's see what it does. It's divine requirements. It's not currently using Mocking Touch on a spell. Ezreal mocks a creature's magical ability with a touch. They attempt a thievery check against the target's will DC. Will DC attack modifier. I'm missing something. Or I think I jumped down a line somewhere. Against the target's will DC. Critical success. The Ezreal learns all spells of 3rd rank or lower, and the target is available to cast and chooses one. The Ezreal gains that spell as a mock divine innate spell and can cast it as an innate divine spell using their own DC and spell attack modifier. Not used within 24 hours. They can't cast it. The creature can't cast the mock spell until the Ezreal casts it first, or the 24-hour period passes, whichever comes first. So that's going to be a lot rougher. That's going to be a lot rougher on spontaneous casters, because while a prepared caster might not have that spell again, so it's not going to matter. A spontaneous caster, that's ripping out their part of their repertoire. And a focus spell, like if this happens to a focus spell, then you've got problems there. Because there's nothing that says it has to be a spell that comes from a slot. As a critical success, but 1 hour instead of 24 hours, and the creature can continue casting the spell normally. Failure as a critical success, but the mock spell is lost at the end of their next turn. And the creature can cast normally, and critical failures, no effect. So that's pretty good. This one doesn't seem to target one that's an active spell. So you just third rank or lower that the target has available to cast, whereas Spell Pilfer steals an active effect on you. I think it's very interesting. I like the synergy between having multiples of them out. And I like their entropy sense, and that it has this specific counteraction, despite being basically just, it knows you're there, because of fate and chance and probability. Protean anatomy is pretty normal, and they have fast healing, which I think is also pretty normal for Proteans. And they're resistant to precision damage because none of their organs stay where they're supposed to be. I'm gonna stab you in the heart. Oh, where is it? Where's my heart at? Where are you gonna stab me? But apparently in Monster Core, we only got 3 Proteans. We got Hecatars, these ones, and Void Worms. Void Worms are good little guys. They're long boys. But it is after 1, and I'm gonna have to get to work soon. So that's all we're gonna cover today. If you're watching this on YouTube and have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. And I will try to remember to put the link to the unspoken rules and guidelines of design in PF2e in the description of the YouTube video. So we're gonna go ahead and try to raid somebody. Okay, we are going to be raiding Ordinary John, who is playing some Pathfinder.